as co-host, Nima Major, and we're bringing back Eloise Smith from the Freedom Foundation. And I just asked you what your dating title was.
Director of Teacher Engagement.
Thank you. Director of Teacher Engagement. So we had Eloise on the show 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, and talking about the incredible work she's doing through the Freedom Foundation, basically starving the teachers' unions to death, if I could put it so bluntly, right?
That's right.
Essentially, since 2018, there was a Supreme Court ruling that said, hey, workers, employees cannot be forced to contribute to public sector unions because the public sector unions use that money for political purposes. So you can't force someone to spend their money on political stuff because you can't. Maybe it's political stuff that you don't like. And of course, this has been largely obfuscated, and people don't know that they can get out of the teachers union. And the Freedom Foundation not only helps them get out of the teachers union, but Eloise went over that the services that the teachers union theoretically provides, there's actually alternatives that are much cheaper and much more effective at providing those solutions. One of the big ones is, like, for example, liability insurance. And I was so fascinated with this conversation because if you've listened to any of the previous shows that we've done on the evolution of civilizations or on Carroll Quigley in general. Oh, Nima, you're flipping stuff around. I got to catch up with these buttons. What I realized is that what Eloise was describing was a perfect example of the institutionalization of a societal instrument. So if this is the first time you've heard us talk about this, we'll briefly hit this again. So this comes from Carroll Quigley's book, and if you're not familiar with Carroll Quigley, you should be. This was the historian of the CFR. Was that it, Nima?
Yeah.
Of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he was a history professor at Georgetown University, and apparently is the only person that Bill Clinton mentioned in, I believe, his second inaugural address as his mentor. He was grateful that Carroll Quigley was his mentor. And Carroll Quigley wrote something called Tragedy and Hope, which is what he's well known for, but he wrote another book called The Evolution of Civilizations, which I think is a better book because he actually posits or he hypothesizes a scientific theory for understanding history. And it's specifically how a societal instrument becomes an institution. What's a societal instrument? A societal instrument is an organization of people that come together to achieve a goal. We're going to be talking about teachers. We're going to be talking about schools. We're going to be talking about teachers' unions today. So the purpose of school is to educate children, right? Or maybe the purpose of a teachers' union is to protect teachers who are supposed to be educating children. So eventually, any instrument, this is what Carroll Quigley posits, is that there are natural forces that lead the instrument to become an institution, and we can get into these forces in a bit. But the end result is that whatever the societal organization was originally created for, that purpose either becomes secondary or even in antithesis to what the organization wants now, which is to perpetuate itself. Vested interests get inside or get in control of the organization, and they say, okay, we are interested in serving ourselves, and what the original purpose is either secondary or, in the case that we're going to be describing, I think is antithetical to what the institution is now doing. So Carroll Quigley even at that point goes forward to say, okay, once an instrument has institutionalized, there are things that can happen that will either the institution either continues to win or something new comes up, or that the institution is reformed to achieve what it was supposed to achieve from the beginning. So that was the quick wraparound on Quigley. We'll pry that apart as we go forward, but I wanted to throw this over to Eloise. Eloise, first of all, thank you for coming back on the show. I've been going nonstop here. Can you tell us a little bit about what you know? Let's focus specifically on public sector teachers unions, the history of it, what they started out as, and what they seem to have turned into.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me back.
Yeah.
Very happy to be here again. So in 1897 was the formation of the first teachers union. That happened in Chicago, and it was called the Chicago Federation of Teachers. That quickly became the American Federation for Teachers, and now that's that same union that started 100 some years ago, 120 something years ago, is now just called Local One. This is the most powerful teachers union in the country. And I can talk more about that specifically if you want, but that's where this really started. The inception of this was in Chicago. And they started with noble reasons. A lot of young women were teachers, and they were being taken advantage of. And so the whole purpose of a union was to advocate for the improvement of working conditions for their members. But within 40 years, that mission changed completely in Chicago. And that's when all these little tiny teachers unions in Chicago formed up and created the American Federation for Teachers in 1937. So that's really where Randy Weingarten's team got started, and that was the height of the Great Depression, beginning of the Great Depression. And they went from fighting for better working conditions for their teachers to immediately having a political agenda. So yes, they were still fighting for their members. Back then, teachers were being issued what was called a one script, or an InScript, which was basically just an IOU and completely useless. It was not helpful for teachers. Like, you couldn't go to the grocery store and turn in an IOU.
What, like they're paying the teachers with these IOUs is what
Yes.
you're saying?
Yeah, saying that they were owed a nickel or $5, whatever it was. And that's completely 100% useless as real money, of course. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's Randy. There's our favorite friend. And so really they started to become a mafia, like right away. And Randy, we like to say, Randy Weingarten is now the leader of the modern day mafia in America. She is the reason that schools stayed closed. She held our kids hostage. This goes back to the 1930s when they would have strikes, and they weren't striking for education reform, for things, but to improve teachers' lives. They were striking for all kinds of stuff, including, this is an actual quote of one of their members. They make their work about the common good: reproductive rights, affordable childcare, affordable housing. That's what they cared about.
Right. And then what's that have to do with either helping kids get an education or protecting the rights of the teachers? Yes. Nothing. And we can see this play out. I mean, it's just gotten worse and worse, but starting in the 70s, especially, everyone since 1970 till now, teachers or students per student, money goes up 152% is how much more money each student gets. But teachers have gotten an 8% raise over that same period. So the teachers unions are not doing what they're saying they're doing. They're clearly funneling money away and using it for other things. Yeah, she's a nightmare. She's a nightmare. We're giving Eloise nightmares just by showing her these pictures, Neba.
This has been really great to follow, actually. If you don't know who Corey DeAngelis is, he's a great follow on Twitter. He has been all over her case on this stuff. He's great.
So what you've described so far is we've got about 40 years of since should I say the starting point is 1897 or?
Yeah.
Okay, so starting point is 1897, and we've got presumably 40 years of achieving, or at least working to achieve, the original goal. And then something happens where, okay, now there's these political agendas that have nothing to do with the original goal. And
exactly.
Would you argue at this point that, okay, there's like the original goal is still on the table, it's just not primary at that point?
Well, it's a good question, because the original goal was to fight for teachers and to fight for better education. And that's during that same time period, you can see the standardization of the American public school system. Everything across the country becomes much more standard, much more uniformed. And a lot of that has to do with what the teachers unions were doing, because they were really actually fighting for teachers and saying, hey, second grade teachers in Chicago need to be working the same amount of hours as second grade teachers in LA. That was great. But then you see that immediately shifts. And now in Chicago, same exact place that all of this started, less than 25% of students are graduating at reading and math proficiency levels. That's horrifying. And that goes directly back to the unions, because you can see since 2010 or so 13 years, they've lost over 50,000 students in the Chicago area. They're going, and I'm sure actually this number is way up since COVID. These numbers I have from before COVID. So they've lost about 50,000 students moving out of Chicago, out of the public school system, because it's so horrifying. It's really dangerous for students too, and it's dangerous for teachers. It's not a safe place. And they go to like the North Shore or somewhere else where they can either have a better public school system or go to a private school, or even be homeschooled, go to charter schools. There's other options out there, but Chicago has such a monopoly on the school system. They've kicked out charter schools. I mean, it's really wild. The teachers unions are not fighting for better education, which is what they were really started for.
Nima, do you have EvCiv handy, the book? I got it right over there, but if it's closer to you, you can grab it. So in Evolution of Civilizations, Quigley posits that and I'm remembering off the top of my head, that there's 3 reasons why we see an organization shift from its original purpose to feeding itself or some other purpose, right? The first is that within the organization, there's no individual whose job it is to say, hey, are we committed to, are we still doing the original thing that we were supposed to do, right? Like in the Army, there's nobody's job that says, hey, are we still putting all our resources to defending the nation, or are we doing something else? Like everybody has their job that they're supposed to do, and they focus on that job. The second reason is that because of humans being human, everybody is naturally looking for a raise. They're looking for a promotion. They're looking for security. They're looking for status. They're looking for, all these things. And when they make these decisions, if I say, hey, I want to get a raise within the organization, I'm not thinking, is this the best for achieving the goal that the organization is set out to achieve, right? No, I'm trying to, improve myself. And what ends up happening is that you get all these individuals who are more interested in whatever the thing is that they're doing within that organization. If I remember correctly, Quigley gives this example, like, again, with the Army, is the Army more concerned about feeding the troops? Is it more concerned about making sure that officers are paid or officers are getting raises? Is it more concerned about making sure that when members from Congress show up, that things look good, or whatever, right? All these individual things. And I mean, even Quigley gives example after example after example when it comes to the military. But one that popped in my head is in World War I think most people are familiar with the fact that people like all these countries kept trying to use cavalry during World War I when the machine guns obviously mowed them down. And the cavalry was there the entire war. It wasn't like, after the first 6 months, they all went, oh, this isn't working. At the end of the war, they were still waiting to get the opening to send the cavalry through. And I guess in the United States, there was actually a battle between, I think it was 2 generals. One wanted shipments to come over with munitions and supplies for troops, and the other one wanted to send feed and horses for horses. Right? Obviously, the feed and horses is not winning you the war, but there's a vested interest now that's propelling this idea of cavalry, which leads into the third thing, which is the vested interest, is that because resources are going to start to flow to a certain group of individuals based on the way that things operate, both within the organization and outside of the organization, they are going to have an interest in making sure that things continue to operate that way. So they're going to make decisions that affect outside of the organization, like, no. Again, with the cavalry, the cavalry has always been the most important thing in wartime, going back, 4,000 years. So we're not going to change that now. and let's make sure that the feed keeps going, as opposed to, oh, wait a minute, things have changed. We need to adapt, right? So with these three things, we eventually morph into the institution. So I wanted to say these three things and see, I mean, both your guys' reaction of, are there details that you can think of based on what I just described that you think apply to the teachers' unions as you've just described them?
Oh, totally. So first of all, no one's making sure we stay on mission. Unfortunately, you'd think that would be the entire organization of the teachers union, because they have one mission. It's just one goal, to help support teachers. That should be it. But they've totally got distracted by that. For every dollar that the National Education Association, which is the largest teachers union in the United States, I think they have 3.3 million members. For every dollar that they spend on teachers, the people that they are supposed to represent, they spend 2 on politics. They are totally 100% distracted from their main goal. Their main goal is no longer teachers. That's just a lie. They put the name teacher in front of their union in order to collect teachers' dues. But their main goal is totally political. It's 100% to get their agenda passed. And we saw that especially clearly during COVID when Randy Weingarten and Becky Pringle, the two presidents of American Federation for Teachers and National Education Association, they both went to the CDC and held our children hostage, saying we will not return to school until XYZ are passed. Well, XYZ had nothing to do with school. It had nothing to do with education. What it had to do with was the Green New Deal. It had to do with defunding the police. What in the world? In Colorado, in 2020, there was not, school shootings weren't happening. COVID had happened though, and it was the Black Caucus from the teachers unions here in Colorado demanded that the school defund the police and get rid of all public safety officers, all armed officers on campus. And this is actually what she said, the leader of this Black Caucus from the Colorado Education Association. She said she didn't want our students, especially our Black students, our colored students, to be greeted with violence at the door when they enter the school. Instead, they should be greeted with nurses and mental health professionals. Well, that explains the mental health crisis, if that's the focus of the school, first of all. But then turn around and 2 years later, back to back at the same school where the same teacher teaches, we had 2 shootings in 2 months. When people died at them. So it doesn't make any sense. Their political agenda is not lining up with education, safety of students, trying to better the next generation at all.
Well, and to that point, because when you first brought up, okay, for $1 that they spend on it, teachers, they spend $2 on politics. My first thought is, well, what's the politics? Because theoretically, they could be taking that political money and saying, hey, we want legislation that benefits teachers. But that's not what they're doing at all.
No.
Right?
They're funding the police.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think this is like this perfect case example of, okay, here's this organization. It's originally designed or created to do X. It takes on a life of its own. And now it's using X. What it's doing is going against the original statement. Like it's not just secondary; it's completely the opposite. Because okay, is the Green New Deal and defunding the police helping teachers' rights? No, it's decreasing teachers' rights. Right? Is making sure that the schools don't open. Helping teachers' rights. No, that's the opposite of teachers' rights. I mean, unless staying home and doing nothing for a paycheck is an example of promoting teachers' rights, which I think is a bit of a stretch.
Well, and when you asked teachers during COVID, 9 out of 10 of them wanted to go back. They didn't want to be out of the classroom. No one wanted to be out of the classroom. They thought it was ridiculous. This whole like, oh, teachers are in danger. We're not going back until we're all vaccinated. That was not true. The unions were speaking for teachers, but they weren't actually speaking what the teachers were saying. They did multiple internal polls about this. AFT also did an internal poll in 2021 asking if they thought if teachers, their own dues paying members thought that the schools were becoming too political. 9 out of 10 of them said it was way too political, but they've doubled down on that. AFT and NEA have doubled down on that. NEA had a conference last year They have these big conferences every single year. They had over 6,000 teachers attend in person, another 18,000 online. They had 110 resolutions that they passed at this teachers conference. 4 of them had to do with education. The rest of them, 106 of them, had to do with DEI, SEL. How do we support...
Say out those acronyms, please, just for people who aren't as...
Diversity, inclusion, and equity, social emotional learning, like really scary things that have nothing to do with education, not bettering our citizens.
This is the critical race theory stuff. This is 1619 project stuff. This is the transgender gay sex for kindergartners stuff. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Like
all that stuff.
Let's teach 3rd graders to be queer. Yeah. All of that's coming out of this. Again, nothing to do with education. They're just trying to get their political agenda across.
This is where I really find this Quigley interpretation, or this Quigley hypothesis, fascinating, because at this point, Quigley says, okay, I just described the theory. I think you just gave a case study that exactly lines up with the hypothesis, right? Mm-hmm. Quigley points out, and he says while these are the pressures, this is the natural tendency for a social organization to do. This is not deterministic. It's not like, oh, we just throw up our hands and say this is what's going to happen and nobody can do anything about it because this is a natural force of history. This is not deterministic. This is just the way things happen if nobody is actively doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Right? So this is where I get excited, because if I could say, okay, first of all, I can calm myself down when I see an institution or an instrument becoming an institution, because I can say, okay, it's a natural process. I mean, it's bad, but I don't have to freak out and be like, oh my God, this thing is happening to this organization that's so unique. It's not unique at all, right? It's happening to all of them. But secondly, we can say, okay, how do we provide the solutions? So Quigley says there's 3 things that can happen once an instrument becomes institutionalized. At some point, because resources are being extracted by this instrument.
Yeah.
Or by this organization, I should say. And it used to be they would extract the resources, and then there would be a benefit to the members that paid those resources in return. Now, the resources continue to be getting extracted, but the original members are not getting what they wanted from it. So some form of resistance will typically happen. And there's 3 ways that this can go. There's, per Quigley, there's reaction, reform, and circumvention. Reaction is when the, we'll call them the resistance, loses. The resistance goes up against the vested interests win, the organization continues to become institutionalized and, continues to gobble up resources to achieve the opposite of whatever it was originally supposed to do. I don't know what that was. The second is reform, which is, okay, people are able to get into that organization and gut it out from the inside and say, okay, we're going to go back to doing what it was originally supposed to do, or even say, hey, there's no reason to do that anymore. What's the new thing that we need to do? That's reform, right? The third one is circumvention, which is to say, okay, let's create another organization over there that actually achieves that goal. And then the resources actually dry up from the old one, because people could just go actually get the service over here, as opposed to continuing to try to get it from the original organization. So based on what I just said there, tell me what you're doing that fits one of those 3 categories.
The Freedom Foundation is doing all 3 of those, actually, which is pretty cool. So first, reaction. The best thing that we can do is to get teachers.
I'm sorry, real quick. Reaction actually means you lose. So hopefully you're not doing all 3. Reaction is you try to fight and then you lose. That's reaction. Like reaction from the vested interests. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Then we're doing the last 2. So we obviously have seen a problem. And so we're trying to fix it. We're trying to solve it. Like you said at the beginning, Dylan, in 2018, a Supreme Court case was passed, which basically defended all of our teachers, all public workers, freedom of speech, saying that political money being donated on your behalf without your permission or your knowledge, just because it's dues money, is illegal. So the unions do not get to speak on your behalf or vote on your behalf with your money. So now teachers and public workers everywhere do not have to join the union. Unions, of course, do not want you to know this because that's their cash cow. That's the only way they make money, is to steal it from their members. And on average, teachers give about $1,100 of their paycheck every single year to these unions. Well, what we've found is if we get these teachers to stop giving their money, it's a snowball effect. Every single year, those unions are losing out on $1,100. That starts to bleed them dry eventually. So to date, the Freedom Foundation has been able to take about $330 million from all public sector unions across the country. And again, that's a snowball effect. So that's just going to keep adding up year after year, which is really awesome.
Well, and then let's just pause there for a second. Your scorecard is $330 million. I don't think we're just dealing with some pretenders here.
We're working hard.
Yeah, and
we're definitely working hard.
And so, we talked about reform and circumvention. Can you address reform first? Because I was going to focus on circumvention, but you said you're doing reform too. Tell me what reform means in terms of these public sector unions.
Yeah, so some of our teachers specifically have decided that they want to fight the union from the inside. So they've taken over their local unions or their really just their local unions. It's pretty hard to get infiltration into the state level or the national union. But if they start local, that's really good. That's a really good place to start. Our teachers often love their local unions because they are trying to fight for them. But on average, about $8 of their the amount that comes out every month, which is like $70-ish, only goes to their local, and the rest
about
of
10%.
It is, yeah, exactly. So the rest of it is going to the national union. So a lot of teachers, what we've seen be very successful is decertifying their district. So they decertify, they get out of the NEA, they get out of ATF, they stop giving them money, and then they form a little local union. And that is incredibly effective. It's doing exactly what the union was set up to do to begin with in 1897. So that's really cool. And some of our teachers actually, one is joining this conference, which I'll talk about in a minute, who is, I'm not going to say too much because I don't want her to get like caught or found out, but she is she's in a position of power at her state level, right, which is pretty great. And she has gone undercover to the NEA conference and has really exposed some of the things that are happening there. So there is some good that's happening. There's some teachers that feel that the $1,100 a month in order to change from the inside is worth it. What's tough is she's obviously fighting an uphill battle. I mean, it's insane. In Chicago, they had this same idea, but it was taken over by socialists, radical socialists, even card-carrying communists. And so now that's how they got Brandon Johnson elected. It was this group called CORE, and now they run the entire teachers union there. So it's tough to do the reform from the inside, but we have seen it be successful in some ways. So that's really great.
Well, and then that even reminds me of we've had Mark Hare on here from the Center for Self-Governance talking about the school board associations, right, at the state level and at the national level, and part of the strategy that they're putting forward to make teachers the primary stakeholder in parents the primary stakeholder in their children's upbringing is to say we got to start decoupling all these organizations, because right now they're stovepiped where the top one could just tell the next one down what to do, and that one tells the next one down what to do, and so on. If the local school board, or in this case the local union, decouples itself, that control ends. So that's huge. right?
It's huge. That's why local politics are so important. I know everyone gets fascinated by national elections and whatnot, but it's so much more important that you get involved in your local elections, school board especially. That really, it's not just going to affect you if you have kids, but it's going to affect single people as well. It's so, so important.
Yes. And then that more and more that I understand systematic politics is I recognize that our system was set up to work that way, which you have all these little independent areas and nobody can grab all the power. And one of the ways you grab all the power is you connect all the independent areas together so they're, built into one structure so you can control it from the top. And breaking those pieces brings the freedom, brings the independence back into those individual places, which, on one hand, someone could criticize this and say, okay, you're not fixing the whole problem, but I would flip that around and say this is the way the whole problem gets fixed, is you do this over and over and over and over and over again until, we'll call it the evil core, starves to death or just doesn't have enough power to tell anybody what to do.
We totally agree with you. And that's why one teacher not paying dues actually is a snowball effect. We've found that when one teacher stops paying dues and then tells other teachers about it, let's say they tell 10 teachers, 80% of them will actually stop paying their money as well, their dues money. So it's totally a snowball effect. It starts, it's cheesy, but just one drop in a bucket eventually is going to create a full bucket. So it really matters.
Let's talk about circumvention.
Okay, circumvention. Yeah. So I already talked about the giant NEA conferences that they throw every single year. They actually throw multiple every year. Just in late April, they had one in Las Vegas that was for their LGBTQ caucus. And you can look this up. It's really gross. They've got all of their workshops online and you can see exactly what they're training these teachers to go back to campuses at schools, elementary schools, and teach this stuff to students. So some of the stuff was like how to teach about queer studies in a conservative area. They're totally targeting our kids. There was another one that was called How to Be a Co-Conspirator. It's totally creepy. So they've got these conferences all over the country.
And then I'm sorry, who's showing up to these conferences? Teachers?
Teachers. Okay. Teachers are showing up to this. And not only are the teachers showing up, but they also get what's called professional development hours. So teachers every year, in order to keep their license, have to get a certain amount of hours saying that they've continued learning.
It's continuing education, basically, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the NEA gives out these certification, these hours for showing up to conferences like that to learn how to indoctrinate our kids. Super awesome. So we've seen that this has been incredibly successful for the NEA, for AFT, and we've decided to take a page out of their book at the Freedom Foundation. So we're going to have our own conference that is counteracting exactly what the NEA and AFT are teaching. We're going to try and empower teachers from all around the country. 250 teachers are being invited to this one. It's in Denver, Colorado this year in July. This year being 2023, just in case someone's listening to this next year. So it'll be in Denver, Colorado. All expenses are paid for teachers to come. We really just want the right teachers to show up.
All expenses are paid. It's a freaking vacation. Sorry.
It is a vacation. It's at the Gaylord, which is like a super nice resort.
Is that what you're advertising on your front page?
Yes, the Teacher Freedom Summit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll be covering topics from Janus rights, which is that Supreme Court case in 2018, and how to decertify. So how to get your local union out of the NEA or AFT, how to stop paying them money. We've got Michael Hartney, who is a Hoover Institute fellow and a professor from Boston College, who's all over the union money. He tracks that really well. And so we're going to show teachers exactly where every single cent of their dues money is being paid or being used. And some of that's going to be really horrifying. Like these teachers often, they're obviously pro-life because they're working in education. They're helping students. A lot of money goes to Planned Parenthood or BLM or things that are obviously anti-America. So that'll be really great. And then lastly, the panel that I think most teachers are really excited about is how to get woke curriculum out of your school, out of your classroom. So we're going to have a panel of experts, including Manny Diaz's chief of staff. Manny Diaz is the Florida Secretary of Education. And yeah, we can play that.
I don't. I'm not sure if the audio is going to come through.
Okay.
No, wait. Try it, Nima. You had the. Bring it back up.
Yeah, I had it turned off deliberately because you were talking, but we can just play the clip, I guess.
Yeah. Try it.
Okay. 1 second.
Teachers unions have publicly said they're not there for the students.
Not only am I not benefiting from this, but I am giving them money to support political things that I just don't agree with. I mean, when I would get their flyers in the mail and they would tell me who to vote for, it was like, I'm literally not voting for any of those people.
The teacher unions have to be political because of where their money is going.
I'm so excited about the Teacher Freedom Summit because it's like the opposite of what we feel on a regular basis. We feel isolated and alone.
Freedom Foundation is providing airfare, hotels, accommodations, so the value that you're getting out of it, not only are you going to learn all this valuable information and network with like people, but it's not going to cost you as a teacher.
I just want to thank the Freedom Foundation for putting this Teacher Summit together. It really is incredible because you're equipping the teachers who are teaching the future leaders of tomorrow, and it really is amazing.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, we're stoked for it.
So we've got the situation, and there's more circumvention I want to talk about here. We've got the situation, like you said, where one of the tools that are literally being used by the teachers unions to train the teachers directly are these conferences, right? Mm-hmm. And they provide I forgot the term you used, but continuing education basically is what it was. Is yours also continuing education?
We're giving out professional development hours for this.
Great.
Yeah.
So you're turning around and saying, okay, we can create an organization too that actually is to achieve the original goal of a teacher, we'll say the teachers union, or I guess the school system in general, which is education of children and protecting teachers' rights. Right?
That's exactly right.
That's awesome. And what you alluded
Sounds
to
like domestic terrorism to me.
It kind of is. If we're going up against the teachers unions, I think we've got to combat them in any way we can.
Anti-terrorism.
We do not support political violence on this show. So you were alluding to the fact that there's some hand-holding that happens here from the teachers unions, right? Like, hey, we'll help you with this. We'll bring you to our conference. We'll give you these resources. We'll do this for you. We'll do that for you. Well, here's liability insurance, for example, right? A lot of people didn't realize, particularly after the domestic, parents are domestic terrorists and thing happened, and the reaction to that was all these people went for school board, that everybody said, these school boards keep wimping out and not standing up for the rights of the kids or actually helping teachers. Uh-oh. So I'm getting Skype.
Sorry, the Teams call. All good.
Okay. And the what was I talking about? Your team's
domestic terrorist school board.
So these people get in the school board, and then they turn around and they wimp out, and people are going, "Why are you wimping out?" And it turns out that the whatever insidious snakes that come behind from whatever organization, the teachers union could just be one of them, right? Going, you're gonna lose your insurance. You're going to lose your liability protection. You're going to lose your access to policy. You're going to lose this. You're going to lose that. You're going to lose your money. Oh, you really want to do that?
Yeah.
Right? So that's what's being whispered in their ear, and they freak out. Well, if liability insurance is an issue, there's actually alternatives to the liability insurance as well, right? So you're helping with okay, here's training, here's policy. We'll hold your hand. Here's a group of people together, and in fact, here's some organizations that'll actually provide liability insurance. So there are options. There are alternatives to all these things that
But the unions don't want our teachers to know that. They do an incredible job lying about this. I actually was just talking to a teacher earlier this week. What day is today? Wednesday? Tuesday? maybe yesterday I was talking to her. She said that she has thought about leaving the union multiple times. She's approached the Freedom Foundation at least 4 times to leave her union. But each time she does, she gets freaked out because she thinks, oh, I need that liability insurance. And again, that's just the union's lies telling them that they're going to lose their pension, that they're not going to get tenure, that they'll be fired if there's some issue with a student. All of that's untrue. So we're actually doing an entire panel on the lies that the unions tell their members. But the other thing that we're providing is the option to meet with these alternatives, like Association for American Education Association. No, that's not it. It's AAE.
American Association of Educators.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know why I was struggling with that. We're providing them AAE, and we're providing them Christian educators and a couple of other groups that give out, or they sell liability insurance to teachers for less than $200 a year. And it's double the amount of liability insurance in the teacher's name rather than in the union's name.
Well, I think that's the biggest one that you mentioned in our last show, is that even when the union says you have liability insurance, you actually don't. The union has a liability insurance, and they can choose whether or not they like you to use it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's sneaky. They're very sneaky.
But plus, if you have an organization like that, like the Randy's organization, they have so much overhead, they can't offer affordable insurance, I guess. Because here we see, okay, you just look around a little bit, you find much better service for less money. You know? Yeah.
Well, and why would Randy want to give up her $600,000 job?
So much overhead and all the LGBTQ indoctrination and all of that. I mean, that's a lot of money that just needs to come from somewhere. You know?
Yeah. That's again, they're spending $1 on teachers for every 2 that they spend on politics, and that's a clear decision that they've chosen to make.
I mean, yeah, it's very clear, and I mean, it's just so bizarre. You know, because it's one thing, like you said, 40 years after the fact, to say, okay, now there's a little bit more focus on politics than there was on teachers, but, maybe the teachers are still secondary. You're still fighting for the teachers, but, you're doing it with 50% of your energy instead of 100% of your energy, right? That's just a completely different world from we screw the teachers and we're actively promoting stuff that, it's one thing that has absolutely nothing to do with teachers and education, but it's another thing where it's like civilization destroying stuff.
I mean,
right?
Two really bad stories came out this week. I'm sure you guys saw. One in Florida, a teacher showed a Disney movie to students during class. Again, first of all, why are you showing a Disney movie in class at all? That's totally inappropriate. They're there to learn. We already see that test scores, students are not graduating at proficiency all over the country. So she's clearly just a negligent teacher. But then on top of that, she chose a movie that is all about the LGBTQ whatever. This came out last year and it did terribly in the box office because parents didn't want their children to see it. She was fired immediately. When asked on television about this in an interview, she said parents give up their rights to their children when they go to a public school.
I did see that. And I even commented on that because she's right. She's legally right.
It's just so scary. This is why we have to get involved in the education movement, because this is the unions came out and defended her. Randy Weingarten was tweeting about this. They didn't want her fired. They think that this was perfectly okay. So parents have to know, teachers have to know that the unions are really trying to kidnap your kids in so many ways.
Well, to that point, I do want to emphasize this when she said that, you don't own, like, the kids aren't yours when they're in school. She is legally correct. That is, every state's got its own thing going on. But from my understanding, every single state has achieved this, which is to say, when your kids are in school, we're in charge of them, not you. By law.
And that's true to an extent, but you can still, as a parent, opt your child out of certain
sure, yeah, but that's what my point isn't. Is it 100% this or 100% that? Is that that's the trend, and that's what they're pushing for, is to say the children are not yours, they're ours. And
Joe Biden said that publicly from the podium just 2 weeks ago. They're our children. They're not your children.
Correct.
They're our children.
Correct.
Hillary Clinton has been on that bandwagon for 25 years. I mean, this isn't a new talking point for them. It's just being
this is a 2,500-year-old talking point. Plato proposed this in Plato's Republic, right?
True.
This is not a new concept whatsoever. So and we've had Mark Hare on here from CSG, is that one of the things that they're really pushing for from the CSG angle, which I think overlaps just completely with what you're doing, is to get it in policy or in law, whether it's state level, county level, city, school board, whatever you can get it at, first recognizing that parents are the primary stakeholders of the children's upbringing.
Yeah.
That totally stops the thing that woman from Florida just said.
This is why teachers unions hate the idea of charter schools, because parents run the charter school. They still get public education money. They get about 80%, depending on which state they're in. Teachers can opt to join the public sector union because they are technically public employees. But they hate the charter school system because it's parent run.
I believe it. I totally believe it. And obviously, if you're a Platoist, someone who's a proponent of Plato's Republic, which there are some big-time individuals who are, Bill Gates is a perfect example of this, that the idea of parents raising their own children is absolutely abhorrent, because that's one of the main things in your way of achieving the societal goals that you have. Because obviously we get our culture from our upbringing, and if it's from our parents, we get our parents' culture. If it's a school, I mean, this is Brave New World 1984 101 stuff, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Bill Gates is he's got his AI teacher bot ready to go, right?
Ready to go.
So what these people are doing, they're just really trying to mess with the school system wherever they can, and basically turn people off completely from it.
All they want to do, they don't want to educate our students. They clearly are not interested in raising an upright citizenry. What they really want to do is create activists. And we can see that on so many different levels. They've admitted to it on so many times. But just because I live down the street from East High School in Denver, where the shooting happened, the second shooting in 2 months in March, after the day after, school was closed, but teachers and students were out marching to end gun violence and whatnot. It's all about activism. It's not about education.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's I think there's this right now, this big trend going on in all areas of society, where everything we thought that we could rely on these people for, they're restricting it now, right? It's not just I just wrote down a couple of things, right? Speech, yay, we can all talk on the internet and all that stuff. That was the pitch, and now it's big tech censorship. No, you can't do this, you can't say that. And yay, we thought we could do shale oil and unlimited energy, etc. But no, climate restrictions, etc. Austerity is restricting money. We can't even trust the voting system because of election fraud. Can't do self-defense because the gun laws are becoming more restrictive. I mean, not everywhere, but this is all part of their agenda, right? Science, now suddenly only settled science is allowed, right? It used to be, we have this open debate, we're going to discover all these things, and now no, only settled science.
And not even settled science, because the transgender stuff that's not science.
No, but they say it. They just say this is the new science now, this new paradigm.
Well, right? And then settled science is a contradiction in terms.
And then
just to throw that out.
They use institutions that have built up a lot of goodwill over the years. Like you were saying earlier, right? Teachers Union was doing good things early on. It seems like right now they're just exploiting the goodwill that was built up by all of these different institutions and all different stratas of society. Now child rearing, you don't even have access to that anymore necessarily, right? Like you just said, teachers own your children. And then lastly, education, obviously, right? Education was supposed to be free and abundant for all the children. And now the teachers unions and the school board associations
prevent it actively.
Prevent it, right? And then try to channel the resources towards, like you said, activism and just all kinds of nonsense. It doesn't help the children really.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, if we're what was it? Becky Pringle, she is the NEA president. She said after COVID, It doesn't matter that our students lost time. She literally said, it doesn't matter that our babies don't know math and reading. What matters is they learned resiliency and how to start a coup. That's what they learned out of COVID.
You know who that comment reminds me of? I think it was Mary.
But sorry to interrupt, but just
Yeah.
the idea that you learned resiliency by scaring the crap out of children about like some virus lingering in every corner of every building and putting masks on.
Did we actually teach resiliency? Because
No, that's what
this
Diva's
is
getting
like
at.
the biggest, largest
the opposite.
mental health crisis that's ever happened.
Right, for sure. No, I mean,
Oof.
now they've raised a generation of hypersensitive people, if anything, I would say. Hypochondriacs, essentially.
Who don't know how to read and write.
The quote that came to my mind when you brought that up was I think her name was Mary Albright. She was the Secretary of something during the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, something during the Bush administration.
Albright.
Madeleine Albright. Thank you.
Yeah, she was foreign Secretary of State.
Okay.
For Reagan, right?
No, for Bush. I mean, maybe something in the past before that.
No,
I don't know.
Clinton. She was Clinton.
No, but she had some response to the Iraq War. She went on the news and
the bombings under the Clinton administration.
Okay, so somebody asked her directly, like, hey, you know, the results of whatever the heck happened has resulted in, like the deaths of like 500,000 Iraqi children. Do you feel that's worth it? And without hesitation, she was like, yeah. We had a policy, we had a goal, we achieved the goal, so yeah, that was totally worth it. And it sounds like what you just said, which is, hey, there was this massive damage to children, but we achieved our goal, so it was just totally worth it. How can you not be happy about that?
There's no way that these people are objectively quantifying the benefit versus cost of what they've done, right? Just come up with some language to come up with excuses for what they've done.
Or just outright deny it. Randy Weingarten was called before Congress 2 or 3 weeks ago now and perjured herself multiple times. They asked her about the CDC guidelines, keeping schools closed, and she said multiple times, lied to their faces and said that she didn't try and keep the schools closed. She tried to keep them open. Yeah. We have all the receipts of that.
So we've gone over this case study. And I think this is absolutely fascinating because, we've talked about the subject a lot on the show, this Carroll Quigley's hypothesis, we'll call it that. And it's not entirely abstract when we talk about it, but it's mostly abstract. I thought this was an excellent opportunity to say this is exactly what's happening. Here are the players involved. And one of the things that we really try to emphasize here are no black pills. Is no black pilling here. Because when you see what's going on, and you say, okay, here's my assessment of the situation. If you take that assessment of the situation and come out with a theory of I'm hopeless and I can't do anything, you've completely misinterpreted your own ability to make free will choices, right? Because if wait, did I hit the right button? There we go. If you which one? Yeah, we did a show on this. Because the universe, our actions are not deterministic. The fact that you are choosing not to try to fix something, you're choosing not to do something good, is you choosing to do evil. And the best way, the most effective way I can defeat my enemy is to convince them that they can't do anything. And it has a snowball effect, kind of, as you were just saying, is that it's like a virus that infects the people nearby. It's this energy suck of this black pill, bleh. Imagine we're getting invaded by the Mongols, right? And we're it doesn't matter by who. And we're locking the city down. We're preparing our defenses, and there's somebody inside the city, like running around screaming, like, "Oh my God, it's all hopeless. We're all gonna die!" He's like a security risk. Both from a morale standpoint, but can we even trust this guy not to like open the gates and betray us?
Yeah, he's kind of the first to roll over, probably.
Right? So it's the same way if we run around, oh my God, look at all these things that happened and it's so bad and none of these organizations are achieving the original goal. Well, yeah, if you understand quickly, you say that's the natural flow of things, and then he gives you the tool. He says, this is how you combat that, and here's how you can make it work. So if you have the idea of I'm going to combat, or you have the attitude, I'm going to combat that, I'm going to go out and make it work, well, then that changes what's going on out there. And so it's people have cause and effect backwards. They look at the situation and they get red pilled or black pilled or white, whatever. I actually don't like the pill terminology. They get motivated to act, or they get unmotivated to act, right? Inspired or uninspired. It's backwards. You get inspired, and then the situation changes because you go out and act, or you get uninspired and nothing changes because you haven't done anything, right? I try to emphasize that, and I know you two get it, but it just doesn't hit people that they just can't get it, that they've got cause and effect backwards. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you had sat down and said, you know what, it's hopeless. Randy Weingarten, she's won. She's the Empress, and nobody can fight her, and nobody can fight the Union, and oh my God, nothing can happen. If you had said that, and the other people at the Freedom Foundation had said that, nothing ever would have happened. And then what was the number that you said? 330 million that you've taken from these, you've gotten away from these organizations? That's kind of a big that's kind of a big number.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, snowball effect. So it's just going to keep getting bigger, which is really good.
Right? So it's the attitude first, and then you go out and achieve stuff, and that creates what you want, versus I'm gonna base my attitude on what I see and then react to it. Right? I mean, that I consider that giving up your free will agency, personally.
Yeah. I think people don't remember that they have more power than they do. You know, voting with your feet, voting with your wallet, that really does, it affects long-term. And look at the Bud Light boycott. That's been incredibly effective.
My only complaint about the Bud Light boycott is it didn't happen a lot sooner. My belief is that Bud Light has always been a champion of trans ideology because it's trans beer. I mean, it's like this disgusting, unidentifiable liquid that identifies as beer. It's always been trans nonsense. But no, to your point, I think Bud Light's kind of a stupid thing to you know, if you're going to get up in arms about something, I'd rather you get up in arms about the public teachers unions, not Bud Light. But to your point, you can see how when people really decide to punish something en masse, it really works. It really works, and I hope that other companies, maybe not Miller Lite because they seem to have bit off the same thing, other companies recognize, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this absolute insanity because we'll pay for it.
Yeah.
Yep. Did either of you have any final thoughts on public sector unions and
I think it's
evolution
just,
of civilizations?
I mean, we've talked about this before, right? That we think that the future might be a more decentralized world, or at least almost all the problems, the solutions right now are more decentralization in our opinion. And I think this is just one more example of that whole trend, because all the things I was listing earlier, you know, speech is being more centralized, but there's all kinds of decentralized tools, solutions, protocols coming out, social media apps, etc., to solve that. And the economy is becoming conglomerized and centralized, but there's also more decentralization going on thanks to cryptocurrency, etc., and just parallel economy, etc. And education, the school board severing ties with the education, state and federal education boards, and then what you're doing with the unions. I think it's just you have the trend with you. You have the support of the overall trends of what's going on right now in Western civilization, Western society as a whole. And I think it's obviously almost everything flows from education, right? So it's almost one of the most important spheres to be involved in and to solve these problems.
Agreed. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be hopeful for. Honestly, COVID was terrible for a lot of reasons, but it was also there's a silver lining in it for sure.
It woke up a lot of people. I think a lot of people have come to me now who before thought I was crazy. I'm sure that's happened to you and to a lot of other people too.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a lot of teachers out during COVID, which is great.
Right. So again, that's more decentralization also, right? There's more homeschooling happening from what I've seen. So that's,
Yeah, the NEA and AFT both lost 3% of their membership 2 years in a row because of COVID and what they were doing. 140,000 teachers left the unions.
All of this, right? These big organizations, they do these things and they're so tone deaf, they don't even seem to care, right? We were just talking about Bud Light, right? They come out with this woke ad that just ruins their sales and they don't care. Disney and all these, they've all gone woke, all their new stuff is bombing. They don't care. Ford has just now done, I guess, some woke ad or whatever. It just tells you there's an agenda behind this, right? It's not done by profit-seeking corporations, companies, or businesses necessarily.
Or, I mean, I've even heard the argument that it's still profit-seeking, but the profit comes from government or
well, it's power more like it's like
NGO funds that say, hey, if you do this, we'll give you money for being woke or gay or whatever.
The COVID reopening guidelines, I think they are the perfect example, right? They published these guidelines for all the business establishments in the country. We had some who did we have on about this? I forgot his name, but he talks about how so much money was just associated with following these rules.
I think it was Washington Civil Rights Council.
Yeah,
Dan Webster. Yeah.
And it just it helps you understand why these businesses were so paranoid about put your mask over your nose and this and that, just because all this grant money was basically being dangled in front of them, and you could lose that if one bureaucrat sees you step out of line, you could lose all this grant money. So it's kind of like a form of soft power almost. They don't necessarily send out the shock troops to make you comply.
Yeah.
But they shut you down and then don't give you any other source of money than your grant money and your COVID relief funds and all that stuff. And then that comes with conditions. So it all goes back to the centralized power. But if things can become more decentralized and people can make their own decisions in their locales, then that's the defeater for them, I think. But it requires attitude changes, and it requires all the technology, all the financing tools that are being built up right now. It's not always easy necessarily, right? It's a fight, but I think we're on the winning side in the long term.
I concur.
Me too.
I concur. Well, it's been great having you, Eloise. Eloise Smith from the Freedom Foundation at freedomfoundation.org. Is there anything else that you wanted to plug? .com. Excuse me, at freedomfoundation.com. Anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, my last pitch will just be if you know of any teachers that should be at this conference. We still have a couple of spots open. So go to freedomfoundation.com and apply at the Teacher Freedom Summit. We would love to see all the conservative teachers there. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it'd be great if we see some liberal teachers there too, right? Like get you guys back. Stop being crazy.
Well, and honestly, we've got a really good number of leftist teachers that are coming from the coast specifically. One is actually suing his union, UTLA, down in LA, and he'll be speaking on a panel. He's a diehard leftist. He is Bernie Sanders leftist, and he decided to be done with his union. He actually was the union president for a long time because of the 2020 get rid of the police on campuses. He watched a child get shot in the back of his head, and the school decided to ban police. And it was like, this is so unsafe. This makes it so unsafe. We need police on campuses. So he left his union, and now he's suing them.
Terrible to hear about the kid getting shot in the head. Great to hear about a leftist suing the union. Okay. Yeah. Well, Eloise Smith from freedomfoundation.com. This has been Dylan Moore and Nima Majur of Irida TV, which you can find at irida.tv. We don't ask you for any money. We'd appreciate it if you would share, like, subscribe, do all that sort of annoying stuff that people ask on all the videos. And we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.